alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a guest who I never really even considered the possibility of having her on until recently, is Kameron Hurley, a favorite author of mine. Welcome to the show, Kameron.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you on. I mean, I don't want to waste any time, so what would be the most salient details to share with people about you right off the bat?
Oh gosh, I write a lot of brutal weird books. I write a lot of shit. I blog regularly at KameronHurley.com. I think a lot of people know me from an award-winning essay called We Have Always Fought. And my latest book is actually The Broken Heavens, which is the final book in my Worldbreaker Saga, which is about the bunch of parallel universes colliding. And I also am the author of The Light Brigade, which is my time-traveling Starship Troopers novel, which is super fun. So lots of people have done speaking engagements, and I do cons and stuff like that. I just came back from Confusion. I was guest of honor there. And it was a really good time, as usual. Excellent karaoke. One of the best cons for karaoke, if people go to cons for that. So.
I've never gone to a con for karaoke, but I did just sing my first karaoke in January. So there you go.
There you go. Yeah, Lee Harris, who works with Tor Books, he is a professional actor and dancer, singer, and he is always there and having a great time. My husband loves karaoke. Scalzi and his wife Christy love doing the karaoke. So it's a good one. People got that karaoke game down over at Confusion. Pro tip, little insider info right there.
And that's in Michigan, right?
Yeah, it's in Michigan. It's Novi, Michigan. Yeah, near Detroit.
Cool. Yeah. I mean to get out there, but it's hard for me to get moving to more of the cons than I already go to.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I only do 2 a year, but and I've only done 2 last year, and usually it's just one my local con.
Yeah.
But there's limits there. So Kameron, you got The Broken Heavens coming out. I did really enjoy the first book of those. I haven't read the second one yet. Mirror Empire was a lot of fun, as I enjoyed all the other books of yours I've read as well. Oh, also mention your Patreon.
Oh yeah, my Patreon. I wrote a short story every single month now for the last I've had the Patreon for 4 years, but I think for the last 2.5, I have been doing a short story every single month. And yeah, people can go to Kameron Hurley or patreon.com/Kameron Hurley. And if for $1, you get the first 4 years of collections. I'm working on the compiling the last year of stories, and you'll get all those with your first pledge. So it's kind of like a super value. A lot of them end up getting republished. Some of them do not. So there's a lot of stuff that's absolutely exclusive to patrons there.
Yeah, and that's you don't have to pay a whole lot there to get a ton of stories. So yeah, it's like $1 a month.
Yeah, $1 a month.
Yeah, just all of them. Yeah, because and that's that kind of reminds me of what indie authors will do with their collections or whatever. Well, yeah, okay, we come out with. I have a 10-book series. We'll put them all in one volume and make it 99 cents, and boom, it flies with the charts because that's a lot of book.
That's a lot of book. Yeah.
Anyway, so it's a similar situation with your Patreon. So as far as your you wrapped up that project, is that the last book in the Worldbreakers then?
That's the last one. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, another complete trilogy.
Yeah, it's all those people who say they're waiting for a trilogy or whatever, a series to be complete. I want to hear you guys. I want to hear you guys running to the bookstore and binging the entire series now. So yeah, it's finally complete. So I'm pretty pleased with that.
Yeah, and I noticed a lot of as someone who started with, I like to go back when I read an author and I really get involved. I like to start with their first book a lot of the time. That's not always the most flattering thing to do. I know a lot of writers would kind of cringe to hear me say that, but I did that with just recently with Ian Fleming. I read the first James Bond novel, Casino Royale, and I've talked about that on the show before. But and I thought that was really good. Also, I think it was his first book. Yeah, his first book he ever wrote, which is kind of impressive because it's actually pretty readable. I envy that. But as far as growing as a writer, that's kind of where my head's been at. Because it's was God's War wasn't your first novel, right? But it was an earlier. I mean, obviously, it was an earlier work than these other ones you published.
God's War was my first published novel. I had written like 8 or 9 books beforehand, just because that's what I had been doing since I was 12. I just was writing stories and novels and things like that. So, but it was the first one. I think it was the third one I shopped around for like agents, and I think I sent one to a slush pile at Tor at some point. But this was the first one that hit. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I mean, it's a fun book. Let me put it that way.
I love it.
People have not. Yeah, go on, sorry.
I love it. Yeah, I'm not embarrassed at all about it. I think it's fantastic. I threw in everything that I loved, and I still write about those characters, to this day in Patreon a lot, because they have a little cult following. People absolutely love those books, and yeah, I do too.
I mean, terrific fun. I mentioned before we actually started recording that Infidel is a tip-top book for me right now. It's just it's a great story, really enjoyable, and in a lot of brutal ways though. I mean, obviously, I've enjoyed some Joe Abercrombie work, but there's something more, and actually it's kind of similar how personal the violence can be in some of your stories, and I do enjoy that as much as it's uncomfortable to read. Anyway, so as far as as growing as a writer, do you feel like you've changed a lot? Because you've changed a lot between the Bel Dame Apocrypha and the Worldbreaker series.
Oh, absolutely. And that's not necessarily. I think you always get some organic change right along the way, just because you're churning and doing lots of stuff. But I have made I've done active practice to level up, how I structure books, how I think about conflict and scenes, how I introduce characters, how I introduce readers to the weirdness of my worlds. I think you look at something like Stars of Legion, where I used an amnesiac trope, which I fucking hate. I hate it. But it worked really well because I wanted to do a weird ass fucking world. It's these gooey, living spaceships. And the best way I found after several iterations to introduce that to a wider audience was to have them learn about it with the amnesiac, right? There's a reason that's a good trope. There's a reason it's used a lot. And I was frustrated that having to do that. That said, it paid off. That book's done very well. It's still selling very well. And that was all about how do I still stay true to myself and do that weird shit that I do, but make it easier to kind of broaden my audience and get them in and hooked into the story before things get really weird, before they get to, chapter 14 and the recycler monsters and all this. I have a lot of time. I delight in people who are reading Stars or Legion, and then I see that I know when they've gotten to it, because almost all of them are like, holy shit, chapter 14, and I'm like, yes. And that's my goal, is I want to share, right, these wild worlds that I do, but sometimes that turns people off. It's too confusing up front. And so learning how to do that has been a very active thing that I've been working on, throughout my career, especially, again, since I, after the God's War books, I switched agents, and my current agent is very involved in the conception of story process, in the structural editing, in career strategy and all those things. So we have, for the last 7 or 8 years, 7 years, been very consciously working to develop my work and level it up.
So as somebody who writes, I feel like I write some weird fiction too. I'm not sure if it would make people quite as, at its most weird. I don't know how ours stack up against each other necessarily, but I want to say it is interesting to me. Do you have any books that are or stories that you would think of as kind of entry level Kameron Hurley stories that are like, start with this one if you're not familiar?
Light Brigade. The Light Brigade, and the reason I say that is because both of my parents were actually able to read it. My dad has actually read a lot of military fiction and military science fiction. He had read Heinlein and a lot of, again, more mainstream stuff. And because it follows a very familiar format to us, which is, the young recruit who signs up for the war and is trained for the war and then enters the war. It was a much easier book for a lot of people who are used to more mainstream fiction to get into than something like either God's War or Stars or Legion, which I tend to be much more beloved by people who are interested in the science fictional aspects. Whereas Light Brigade is a little bit more accessible to folks who, again, like military history, who like, mainstream action and thriller novels and things like that. So yeah, for sure, that one.
Cool. I read the original story you had on Patreon that was titled Light Brigade, and that was really fun. I haven't gotten around to getting to the novel yet. Mm-hmm. Because obviously I should stop bringing that up because I'm a terrible reader. But anyway, and
in fairness, I've written a lot of books.
Yes, you have.
Last 9 years, I've written like 12 books. So, I can't even keep up. I don't even think I read Stars or Legion all the way through. I was just like, just ship it. We got to get it out the door. I was like, I said to my agent, is it done? Is it good enough? She's like, it's great. I said, good, because I don't want to read it. So, yeah.
Actually, that's funny. I have not had that experience quite, because obviously I don't have an agent or a publisher, but I do find like I kind of dread going back to read my own books again. Yeah. Once they're published, especially. I've done it more recently because I recently got enough money to start hiring a proofreader all the time for every novel. And so I went back to the books I hadn't had proofread, which is, and I said, okay, you're going to do all these now. And my proofreader went through them all. So I did have the opportunity and the kind of the duty to reread them all. And it was kind of, over the past year, I reread like 10 books, mostly novellas, but yeah, 6 novellas or so. And it was kind of relieving for me because mostly they weren't as bad as I thought they'd be. And they didn't make me cringe as much. So it was a nice reward after doing this for 16 years. Yeah. Writing novels for 16 years, where I remember editing my first book and it was so bad,
Yeah, with when I went to write Broken Heavens, I had to reread the first 2, Mirror Empire and Empire Ascendant, because of course I wanted to make sure everything was correct and all of that, everything is canon. And yeah, there was kind of that sigh of relief of like, okay, hey, this is pretty good. And I was actually like putting on Instagram like good quote. I was like taking pictures of really cool quotes. I was like, wow, that's really brilliant. I'm really fucking brilliant. Yeah. So it is nice when you get distance from it, when you can become kind of like fan out of your own books. Like, oh yeah, right. What a great book. Because that's what you get into it for, is writing the books that you wanted to read. Right. Yeah, it's a delight. So.
And it helps write the book description, let me tell you. Because if you're reading a book as a reader, one of your own books as a reader, and you like it, oh boy, it makes it a lot easier to try to sell it. Mm-hmm. I imagine that. Does that work the same way? I guess you're not really done with the book when you submit it to an agent or a publisher. So yeah, it's not really complete yet.
It's you get it as far as you can on your own. I think, and that's what the 3 God's War books were. Because there wasn't a lot of editing. It was a smaller press. So there was copy editing and there was like a high level kind of glance at it. But a lot of it, I just was like, okay, it's done. Or, okay, I have 2 weeks. I have to finish up the last half of this novel. But yeah, nowadays, by the time, like my agent's already seen the first 50 pages of my new novel and given me some, some revision notes on that. And that one's due April 1st. And then she will get the full manuscript. She'll give me stuff on that. Then my editor will get it. And then he'll give me stuff. And then they'll both give me stuff. That's what happened with Light Brigade. And so, yeah, they're never finished. They're as finished. They're either as finished as you can make them, or they're as finished as you can make them by the deadline at this point.
Yeah.
So and you're just like, oh, well, we'll finish it in post. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, do you mind? Is it possible for me to ask you what you're working on right now, as far as new books?
Yeah, it's been announced. Yeah, I'm working on a science fiction thriller called Losing Gravity, and I describe it as Die Hard meets Killing Eve in space. So it is sort of a spy action thriller. and I got to get that to my editor this spring because it's coming out next spring. So.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so it's not that long by the traditional standards. It's pretty close.
Not that long by publishing, by the churn of publishing, for sure. No, I've known people who, well, again, even my first novel, I think we initially sold it in 2007, 2008, and because of publishing nonsense and things were canceled, then we had to find a new publisher, and it didn't come out till 2011. So that's a pretty good. My turnaround these days is getting faster, so that's good. A year is usually, they can push things through faster. Like if George R. R. Martin tomorrow turned in his book, they could pump it out in 3 months. But generally they'd like to have, like 9 to 12 months to get it through the system for sure. And a lot of that is just for sales. They want the sales team to be aware of it. They want, to think about how they're going to present it to book buyers and all of that stuff. Whereas, like a George Martin or something else that is very timely is going to sell itself because there's going to be so much, hoopla around it.
Yeah, they don't need to promote George R. R. Martin at this point a whole lot. He's
not anymore. Name. He's it's the show has done it for him. So yeah.
Yeah, or like that makes sense. So do you? So as far as your quick turnaround, do you think quicker turnaround anyway? Do you feel like you're able to write more? Like you're able to complete stories more efficiently, let's say, because of all the work with Patreon, or did you write short stories before you started Patreon?
I had written short stories before Patreon, but I mostly wrote them knowing that I was writing them because when I first came up in the business, the idea was that you would write short fiction to establish yourself as a writer, which would then get you attention from editors and things like that. This did actually work. Weirdly enough, again, different age. This did actually work because my agent at the time sent God's War to an editor at a house who rejected it. And then another editor at that same house actually emailed my agent and said, "Hey, I saw that Kameron Hurley has a book on submission. I saw it, via Twitter or blog post or something. And I read a short story of hers and I really liked it. Could you send me the book?" So like at the time, that was how it was done, right? You establish yourself short fiction. I hate short fiction though. Like it was not my forte. I didn't feel I was very good at it. Well, like with anything else, you get better at something if you do it a lot. So I started to learn how to structure short fiction, how to write it very quickly. And it actually has taught me a lot, again, about structure on the smaller scale level. And that helps me, with the novels and stuff as well. There is something about forcing yourself to complete something so that you have experience writing a beginning, a middle, and an end. That has been really beneficial for me, the last 2 to 4 years, because it has helped me level up by making me do it. And, like I said, it wasn't the first thing I would think of that I would be, enjoying. But at this point, I feel like I've gotten it down enough where I do actually enjoy myself. I'm writing a fun one right now that I'm like, oh yeah, I can't wait to, knock off work and go back to that one. So that's a good sign.
No, that's awesome. I only wrote my first published. Well, I guess I've written a few short stories, but I wrote a few that went for anthologies last year. Mm-hmm. And I mean, because one of them I did in a single day, and that was kind of incredible and made me feel really good. But I mean, I wrote it in one day and then I edited it, of course. But there's especially because those anthologies, they demanded kind of long stories, like 6,000 mm-hmm. plus. It was a very weird kind of requirement, 6,000 to 10,000. Like, mm-hmm. That's kind of a big short story.
Yeah,
is what I thought. But whatever. And those are out now. Those the Bayonet Books anthologies. There's 3 of them. Anyway, just thought I'd do the plug because we're getting to that part of the show. But anyway, that's the very end of the show. So as far as what you've been reading lately, Kameron, can you recommend anything you've been reading?
Oh yeah, I'm reading a book called The Down Days by Ilza Hugo, and it is about a laughing sickness that overtakes South Africa, and they end up quarantining the entire region. And of course, I lived in South Africa for a couple of years. A lot of the stuff you'll see in the God's War book is inspired. I can see a lot. It is funny because I'm reading it and I'm seeing so much of where God's War sort of came from. I don't know, in the book. Anyway, so it's a really good book, really great. And I also, actually, I just got a copy of K.S. Veloso's The Wolf of Oren-Yoro, which I blurbed. And that is a really excellent epic fantasy. And she actually self-published that first. And my agent thought it was so good. She managed to, I don't know how she did this. She managed to actually sign her and then go to Orbit and get her a traditional publishing deal via Orbit. And they re-edited and re-released all the books in paperback. And they are very good. And that one, I think, just came out a couple months ago. So.
Oh, badass. And that sounds like quite a coup for that author and her agent.
Right? Yeah, no. And that's, that's also the dream, right? Is like somebody reads it and goes, this is so good. I think we can repackage this. And my agent's very smart that way. She is, again, very strategic and is always thinking of ways to scheme, as she calls it, ways to scheme. And yeah, she picked up this author, and it was a good pick. Good pick.
Well, great. Wonderful. I'll try to remember to put those in the show notes, but I never do. So people just listen carefully and take notes when you go back through if you're interested in those books. So, as for me, I've been reading Shadow and Bone, which is this YA fantasy. I think it's by Leigh Bardugo. Yeah, that's the one. And it's the first of this Grisha universe thing. I just gave it a shot because I have books lying around. And it's good so far. I mean, I've only read a few pages, but I don't mind the writing style. I'd heard mixed things about the series, so I was surprised that I actually don't, because I'm a picky guy. I was an English major, but I'm like, oh, this reads pretty well. It's enjoyable. Maybe I'm just getting over my pickiness. Maybe that's either way, it's a good thing. So I recommend that one.
Yeah, maybe so. She's also a delightful human being, and she has a huge fan base. I've been with a signing with her, and I was like, oh, who is this? And then there's like these billions of fans were coming up. I'm like, clearly I'm out of the loop here. Yeah, she's a delight.
Wonderful. Whatever. Great. All right. Thanks for being on the show, Kameron. Where can people find your work and you? I mean, obviously, your work's pretty prolific at this point.
Yeah, at this point, you can find me anywhere fine books are sold. But you can find me on the web, CameronHurley.com, and that is Cameron with a K, or on Twitter at Kameron Hurley, and of course, patreon.com/Cameron Hurley. Great.
It's been awesome having you on the show. Great. It's sometimes it is good to meet your heroes, folks. Anyway. At least through the medium of a podcast. So thanks for listening, everybody. As for this podcast, you can find us at mentalcellarpublications.com. We're hosted by Libsyn, and you can find more about me on amazon.com and mentalcellarpublications.com. So I'll say that again. Thanks for listening, everybody, and have a good week.
That tears it.